Alex Eala released a 15-second clip that nobody anticipated it. Within a few hours, brands were engaged in combat. The WTA was in a panic, and Twitter for tennis was ablaze. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a grievance. It was one sincere moment that revealed everything that the sport attempts to conceal. One viral video, one question, and an entire industry forced to pick a side. It began just like every other Tuesday evening. Alex Eala had just concluded a vicious Leon is a 3-set qualifier. The type of bout that exhausts you completely. The sort when your legs shake ascending the stairs back to the changing room. The cameras aren't visible because you're not a top 10 player yet. She was alone in her hotel room. No team, no coach accompanying her on the trip that week. Simply a phone, her, and the unadulterated tiredness that results from pursuing a dream nobody promised would be fair. And then she did something that would alter everything. She hit record. The video lasted about 15 seconds. Lengthy. No filter, no script, just Alex seated on the edge of her bed, still in her matching attire, displaying a pair of training shoes with obvious holes in the bottoms. She had her racket bag open in the background, displaying equipment that had certainly seen better days. Her expression was flushed, hair still moist from the match, eyes tired, but honest. The caption was easy. "This is what it means to live the dream." Truly appears to be. She shared it with Instagram at 11:47 p.m. local time. Next, she most likely dozed off while thinking nothing about it. However, the internet never sleeps. By dawn, the clip had 500,000 views. It was beyond 2 by midday. Million. Tennis discussion boards were analyzing every frame. Threads on Reddit were comparing her predicament to other rising stars. Twitter was split between those defending her integrity and those who are calling her ungrateful. Because here's what no one wants to acknowledge it. Tennis sells you a fantasy. The civilian aircraft, the champagne sprays, the fancy clothes following Grand Slam triumphs. What it doesn't show you is the years spent in challenger competitions with cash prizes that hardly covers your flight home, the hours alone at inexpensive hotels, the injuries you endure while playing because you cannot afford to miss competitions. Alex Eala had nothing to complain about. She was simply being real, and that terrified people. The comment section became a war zone in a matter of hours. Some fans praised her openness. Finally, someone informing the reality, one comment that was read over 40,000 views. "The WTA must observe this," said another. However, corporate accounts remained eerily quiet. PR. Teams were obviously rushing because this wasn't just a cute behind-the-scenes moment. This was a 20-year-old Filipino sportsman ranked outside of the world's top 100 that the emperor was naked. Her principal sponsor having just launched a global program aimed at empowering the future generation. Their billboards displayed happy athletes and spotless equipment. Their commercials talked about dreams coming to pass. And here was one of their own sponsored athletes demonstrating the disparity between reality and marketing. The video continued to spread. Journalists covering tennis started writing. Podcasts from Think Pieces devoted whole episodes to it. 48. A few hours after the video became popular, Alex's at last, the primary sponsor, broke their quiet. The statement was delivered. 9 o'clock on their official Twitter feed a.m. Eastern Time. It was business-related. It was cautious. It was precisely what you'd anticipate from a legal team working overtime. "We are immensely proud to encourage Alex Eala to play tennis. Journey. Our dedication to athletes' development doesn't stop. We offer thorough assistance to all of our ambassadors and are always open to conversation about their requirements." Notice what they remained silent. They failed to deal with the worn-out shoes. They didn't mention the disparity between their advertising promises and the realities that their sportsmen had to deal with. They used the phrase support 3 times without specifying what that supports truly appeared to be. The internet spotted quickly. Within an hour, that tweet had a worse ratio than a scandal in politics. Thousands of comments referring to it as tone-deaf. Hundreds of people pointing that conversation isn't the same as action. The company's social media division started eliminating the most crucial reactions, which exacerbated the situation. Because in 2026, you can't just PR you're far from being genuine. However, here's where it became interesting. Rival brands scented blood in the water. A competitor brand, one that had been fighting for market share in tennis for many years, revealed anything fantastic. They made no mention of, by name, Alex. They didn't even reference the dispute head-on. They simply uploaded a photo of their athlete support program with the tagline, "Real support isn't a picture opportunity, it's an appearance for athletes at all levels and rankings, every day." The connotation was extremely clear. Obvious. Another sportsier business left even more. Their VP of Athlete Relations made a thread breaking down precisely what was covered by their contracts for developing players. Stipends for travel, regulations for replacing equipment, mental health resources, and performance incentives that began at the challenger level, not simply grand slams. It was a masterclass in a competitive stance disguised as openness. Social media burst into camps. #T began to trend alongside #athletes. Deserve better. But there was also pushback. Accounts that seemed strangely new began sharing information regarding how athletes must be appreciative, and no one pushed to engage in tennis. The conversation turned poisoned rapidly. Twitter split for tennis into factions. Some defended the conventional sponsorship approach, contending that aspiring athletes must earn their assistance through outcomes. However, others pointed out that you can't acquire outcomes if you're playing wounded with inadequate equipment due to financial constraints improved. Former players started weighing in with their own experiences. One Grand Slam champion told a tale regarding touring for 3 years prior to her could afford to take a coach ride continuously. Another discussed deciding between physiotherapy and eating well because her sponsorship didn't address both. The WTA remained silent, which in some way made everything worse. On the 5th day, the dispute was still scorching fiercely. News cycles had picked it up. A part was broadcast on ESPN. The tennis channel set aside a panel for conversation about it. Even the mainstream media outlets were reporting on Alex Eala scandal as a business narrative about sports. The WTA then made the decision to react. The statement was released via official channels. 2 p.m. on a Friday. It's probably time to reduce the immediate negative reaction prior to the weekend, but in the age of social media, time means nothing. The declaration said, "The WTA values all of our players, in part, and the collaborations that make professional tennis feasible. We remind all athletes of the professionalism guidelines specified in the Player Guide, which covers social medium that represents the integrity of our sport. Players are urged to work directly with their administration and sponsors about any contractual or support issues as opposed to public forums." Read it again. Examine the language, standards of professionalism, behavior on social media as opposed to public forums. They were not dealing with the problem. They were tone policing the person who reared it. The response was both nuclear and instantaneous. Within 30 minutes, the present players began subweeding. Nothing direct enough to risk fines, but pointed enough that everyone knew exactly what they meant. One top 50 player posted, "Interesting what professionalism usually entails." Another person posted a quotation regarding institutional gaslighting with "no more context is required." However, the most forceful reaction came from someone unexpected. A player who recently retired, someone who had won several Grand Slams and having nothing left to lose, shared a long-form statement on Instagram. She highlighted her own early professional problems, the time she was hurt while playing because she couldn't afford to fall in the rankings, the contracts for sponsorship that guaranteed support but gave the bare minimum, the quiet surrounding financial struggle because acknowledging it meant being called difficult or ungrateful. She then said something that broke the internet. The WTA's reaction to Alex Eala tells you everything you need to understand. They're more concerned with protecting brand relationships than safeguarding players. "I'm happy to be retired, since I am at last able to be honest." Millions of people viewed that post in hours. Journalists covering tennis began retrieving previous remarks, interviews, previous times where players had teased at these difficulties yet fell short of being clear. There were patterns. Stories that felt like solitary incidents suddenly appeared like systemic issues. The WTA declaration had completed the opposite of what they intended. Rather of quieting the debate, they'd confirmed all of the criticisms. Rather than demonstrating their athlete support, they had demonstrated the precise location of their priorities lay. Behind the scenes, sponsors were allegedly incensed about the WTA for making matters worse. A few were thinking about how to separate themselves from the assertion. Others were stepping up after witnessing the backlash as proof that athletes nowadays don't comprehend professionalism. Tennis was devouring itself because to the within. Mainstream media caught up on the standpoint of player rebellion. Headlines wrote themselves, "Tennis stars rebel against the WTA following a contentious declaration." Tennis's generational divide blows out over social media regulations. Is professional tennis broken? Was the response. Yes, it appeared to be. And it had taken one honest video from a 20-year-old to prove it. The WTA had added fuel to the fire, but they had no idea that brands were about to turn this into an all-out war. By the end of week 1, this was no more than just a tennis tale. It had become a case study in brand strategy, athlete empowerment, and corporate accountability. Additionally, 2 significant sportswear businesses were going to transform it into a battlefield. The first shot came from a brand that has been pretty quiet in the early pandemonium. They'd observed, examined, and spotted a chance that was too wonderful to overlook. Day 8 saw them host a press conference. Not on social media post, rather than a written declaration, a real press conference with their CEO, their head of athlete relations, and 3 of they sponsored tennis players that were placed outside of the top 100. The announcement was astounding. They revealed the Rising Stars Equity Initiative is a radical reorganization of how they encouraged the growth of athletes. Each and every player they supported, irrespective of rating, would be given a starting point $15,000 worth of equipment every year. Automatic replacement of worn equipment and tournament travel stipends outside of their local area, access to mental health and sports psychology resources, and above all, performance bonuses that started at not just the tour, but the challenger level. The CEO was straightforward. We've heard the conversation going in tennis. Athletes like Alex have been heard by us. Eala, who has demonstrated the disparity between our marketing and their actuality. Today, we're closing that gap because helping the next generation shouldn't be a slogan. It ought to be the norm. They never mentioned their competitors by name. They didn't need to. The game of tennis world exploded again. Alex's original, the sponsor, was placed in an impossible position. They might look away and ignore it. Worse, in contrast, they could match it and acknowledge that their prior assistance was insufficient. They might assault it as a risk-taking and publicity stunts defensive. They went with option number 3. Their VP of marketing went on a huge sports podcast 2 days later. He spoke regarding long-term collaborations and gaining support through hard work. He implied, without explicitly stating it, that quick equity programs would produce arrogant athletes who didn't value hard labor. The quotes were snipped and disseminated via social media within minutes. The criticism was quick and savage. Athletes who participate in several sports chimed in on more than just tennis. Basketball players discussed their shoe deals. Soccer players talk about their gear. Agreements. The discussion grew beyond tennis, into a more comprehensive analysis regarding how sports companies handle cultivating athletes in all contests. However, here is where it ended up very chaotic. A third brand, one that had been entirely silent till now, observed both of their rivals bleeding, and made the decision to twist the knife. They started a social media campaign named Real Support, Real Stories. They collaborated with athletes ranked in the middle spans tennis, track and field, and swimming to share unfiltered videos about their experiences with sponsorships. Day 12. Almost 2 weeks since the initial video, the debate had somehow become larger, more difficult, more consequential with every day that goes by. Afterwards, at 7 p.m. Alex Eala posted once more at Manila time. It didn't go via a corporate statement PR groups. It wasn't a well-made an apology intended to make everyone at ease once more. Alex was seated there, in the same hotel room, wearing a plain t-shirt, staring straight into the camera. The duration of the video was 2 minutes and 43 seconds long. She took a breath to begin. Something you could tell was steadying her anxiety. Hello, everyone. I realize a lot has occurred after I uploaded that video. Almost 2 weeks ago. I haven't said much, because it took me some time to process everything, to comprehend what I genuinely wanted to convey, because this becomes so lot bigger than I ever expected. Although the speech was quiet, you could hear the weight within it. I want to be really clear about something. The video wasn't an assault on any individual. It wasn't a grievance. It was merely a moment of honesty after an extremely difficult day. I was worn out. I was alone. And I was simply being honest about what that moment felt like. She hesitated, gazed down briefly, then back up. However, I've read everything that's been mentioned. I've observed how other players began telling their tales. I've watched organizations and brands react. Additionally, I realize now that my reality was a lot of people's reality. That was how I felt by myself. In my hotel room that night, hundreds of other athletes were experiencing their own rooms on their own travels. This was the moment that everyone had been anticipating for. Would she say she was sorry? Would she return? Down. Would she get more aggressive? I'm not sorry for being honest. I can't be, because if people were uncomfortable with my honesty, perhaps that suffering was required. Maybe we needed to have these talks that everyone was avoiding. The internet held its breath. To my sponsors, I'm grateful for your assistance. I actually am. This sport is expensive and impossible without collaboration. However, I also believe we can be thankful and truthful at the same time. I am able to value what I have and continue to admit that the system could be better. These two items aren't contradictory. She shifted slightly, and it was evident that she was approaching the core of what she intended to express. To the WTA. I respect this organization and what is designed for women's tennis. However, I also think we need to talk about how we help gamers at every level, not just the ones who make headlines, because everyone at the top was once where I am right now, and the route shouldn't be this difficult just because we're still climbing. Then she said something that would be quoted in every article written about this debate for months to come. If my honesty makes you, perhaps that's why it's uncomfortable. Perhaps the beginning of transformation is discomfort. I don't know the answers. I'm 20 years old, attempting to enter professional tennis, but I know what I've seen, and I am aware that I'm not, she concluded, alone in experiencing it. With a little smile, the first genuine expression throughout the entire film. Many thanks. To all those who shared their own story, to the athletes that spoke up even when it was risky, to the fans who asked queries rather than just acknowledging the situation as it is. 3 weeks later, a 15-second video altered everything. The tennis world was still feeling the aftershocks. Alex Eala played her next competition in Prague. She won her first straight-set qualifying match. Press conference following was packed with reporters who had never reported on a round of qualifying in their lives. Inquired about the dispute. Answered briefly, politely, then I've been redirected to tennis. Compete, she said. The talks events are significant. However, at the moment, I need to focus on my game. She lost in the qualifying final round, although her social media following had tripled. Sponsors who'd never glanced at players suddenly, those below the top 100, were fascinated, not because of her ranking, but because of her influence. The brands that had fought in battle were still situating themselves in the following. The business that initiated the Rising Stars Equity Initiative witnessed a significant rise in positive brand emotion. Their athlete roster grew. Young athletes especially asked to be taken into account for their sponsorship programs. They had transformed a public relations crisis into a competitive edge. Alex's initial sponsors updated their contracts covertly. They didn't disclose anything major, but agents and players observed the equipment. Packages enhanced, support systems extended. They had discovered that in athletics, genuineness is more important than conventional marketing narratives. Brand that had expressed disapproval of equity initiatives encountered the most severe opposition. Several high-profile athletes choose to not extend their agreements. Their social media engagement plummeted. They finally hired a new VP of athlete relations and launched a listening trip to gain a deeper comprehension of player requirements. Market had spoken, and it had sided with openness. The WTA's task force held its first meeting in week 4. They included players from different rating levels, different regions, different stages of their careers. Early reports suggested genuine discussions regarding prize money distribution, travel support, and psychiatric health resources. Would it lead to real change? That was yet to be determined. Although institutional transformation is gradual, at least the discourse was going at the greatest levels, not just in hospitality rooms and private group conversations. Sports were watching. Player alliances in basketball, soccer, and golf was experiencing internal conversations on athlete support models. Alex's moment had spread to tennis into a more general discussion regarding professional sports' approach to developing athletes. tennis journalists continued to investigate. More stories emerged concerning financial challenges at lower tiers of rating for mental health effects of frequent travel with insufficient assistance for the players who gave up because they weren't talented, but because they were unable to proceed. The documentary series The Real Tour declared that it would set aside and player economics throughout the whole episode in Season 3. Alex has been asked for she was thinking about doing an interview. However, the biggest shift was cultural. Young athletes felt authorization to be truthful about their experiences, to share the terrible moments alongside the highlights. Alex Eala didn't intend to launch a revolution. She merely wished to have a little moment of truth after a difficult day. But that truth revealed something that the tennis community had been disregarding for many years. Between the ideal we promote and the reality athletes live. What started as a single viral video turned into a movement. Brands went to war over athlete sponsorship. The WTA has to deal with unpleasant questions. Players found their opinions, and a whole sector had to determine whether it was more concerned with defending its image or protecting its athletes. The narrative is not finished.